Okay, hello everyone. You're probably wondering where I am and what I'm wearing. I'm not an air traffic controller or a pilot. It turns out my son's gaming headset works very well for recording video and making phone calls. So whilst he's been homeschooled and banned from playing games during the week, I've taken possession of his gaming headset. Now, the week has been a very eventful week. Things are changing by the day at times. And what we have is the latest announcement, which I'll cover first from the government, which is the government's JobKeeper allowance. Now, Scott Morrison and Josh Frydenberg held their press conference yesterday, and shortly thereafter, a fact sheet was released by the Australian Tax Office. Really, the fact sheet and the press conference is all we have to go by at the moment in terms of advising on this. So forgive us if there's some detail we're not quite aware of, because we're all waiting the outcome of legislation arriving. There are some ambiguities because when you work from a press release versus the legislation, you do begin to wonder how some of the concepts will work. So for that reason, we'll have to make a few assumptions in this video. Hopefully it's still helpful for everyone. And once the legislation is released and we've got our head around it, we'll release something further to guide everyone. So yesterday's big announcement was the $1,500 a fortnight employer JobKeeper allowance. Now, Scott Morrison was keen to point out this is very different to the UK wage subsidy, which was aimed at those who had lost their jobs. He made it very clear he called this a JobKeeper allowance because he wanted employers to keep people in jobs. So it's an important distinction. I was already asked the question yesterday, can an employee who's no longer working for you compel you to pay them this? And the answer is no, because this isn't a payment through the welfare system. This is a payment from the tax office to the employer linked to continued payment of wages. So it's quite important. Now, how does it work? It really is, you split your employers into two categories. One is employers with a turnover of more than $1 billion, and those who are employers with turnover of less than $1 billion. So if you've got turnover of more than $1 billion, your drop in revenue for a comparable period last year, the month in question, has to drop by 50%. For most of our clients, they're going to fall into the turnover under 1 billion category. And for those, if you've got a turnover of less than 1 billion, your turnover compared to a comparable period the same time last year, measured by the month, has to have dropped by 30%. Now, again, this is all from the fact sheet. This is about all we've got at the moment. So with the legislation, they may come up with some fine-tuning or some clarity over exactly the measurement period. Assuming you meet that first eligibility criteria, you can register as of yesterday with the tax office via self-declaration. Now, self-declaration means that you declare, much like a self-assessment system with our taxes, that I'll meet this criteria. I'm less than, my turnover will drop by 30%. Presumably sometime later, when tax returns are actually lodged, they will do a reconciliation to see whether you actually did have a drop. Whether or not they require full repayment, we don't know at this stage. Once you've registered, they will look at making payments for wages that are paid from 30th of March onwards. That will go for 6 months. So if you remain in business for 6 months and continue paying wages, the government on a per fortnightly basis will pay you $1,500 per employee per fortnight. The first physical payments are expected in the first week of May. So the tax office will need about a month to put the measures in place, allow everyone to register, and single touch payroll, which has been in place effectively for every employer since 1st July 2019, will be the mechanism by which they cross-check the wages that are being paid and who your employees are. It will only apply to employees who have been on your books since 1st of March 2020. So uh, any attempt to quickly onboard employees won't qualify. If you've laid someone off and decided to rehire them, and they were an employee at 1st of March 2020, they will requalify. Similarly, if you stand someone down and they have no work to do and are not being paid but are still an employee, they will qualify as well. The payment is not a payment to the employee. It's a payment to the employer. You receive it and then you're expected to pay it out. For your employees who are paid more than $1,500 a fortnight, you're effectively receiving a subsidy from the government. They are subsidizing the cost of that person's wage. Contractually or by agreement, if you've agreed to say pay them $3,000 a fortnight, you'll still pay them $3,000 a fortnight, but the government's subsidizing half of it. Now, curiously, from the fact sheet and the example, remembering it applies to full-time, part-time, and long-term casuals, if you have someone who's earning less than $1,500 a fortnight, you are to pay them the full $1,500. So for example, if someone's only working for you 2 days a week and receives $1,000 a fortnight, as a result of this employer subsidy, they will actually receive $1,500. You'll pay them extra. That's what we've got from the fact sheet so far. Now, some questions that were typically asked. One, does super apply? The answer is yes. Remembering that the amount you receive from the government is a subsidy if you are paying them for work that they are doing. So they're still working for you 5 days a week, and in my example earlier, they're being paid $3,000 a fortnight. The full $3,000 is what's called ordinary times earnings, and you pay superannuation on that at 9.5%. If, however, you've spoken to them and maybe you've stood them down or you've said, I haven't got enough work for you to work 5 days a week. You can work 1 day a week, or as a job comes in, we'll work something out. Okay, and let's say it's less than $1,500 a week. Say it's only $500 a week worth of work you've got, $500 worth of a fortnight of work you've got for them. You'll still pay them the full $1,500. The $500 in my example, where it relates to work you actually have for them to do, is still superannuation guarantee subject. Okay, it's still ordinary times earnings, still subject to superannuation guarantee. The excess, the amount the government says you've got to pay them the extra, okay, my example, the extra $1,000, is not ordinary times earnings, it's not subject to superannuation guarantee. That's what we can gather so far from the example that's given, okay? So I had a question yesterday from a client, okay? He said, if I have to pay super on this amount, I'm still going to have an issue because I literally have no work for anyone. Government regulation has meant I can't even trade. Well, in this example here, if he keeps them on and they've got no work to do, but he's just passing on the subsidy, it won't be subject to superannuation because it won't be ordinary times earnings. So that's what we're seeing in the latest announcement from the government. It doesn't come at insignificant cost. You're looking at 130 billion is what they've budgeted for this. And this combined with our about 70 odd billion in previous stimulus is bringing us close to 20% of GDP. So this is a very significant injection into the economy by the government to keep it afloat during this time. In terms of other things to be aware of, okay, if you don't end up continuing in business the entire time of the 6 months, well, it stops. So it's linked to the continued payment of wages. That's important to remember. Okay. The other big thing with this is self-employed people qualified. Now, for a self-employed person, they've said you need to provide an ABN, Australian Business Number, and the name of a person who's to receive this. What we don't have details on at the moment is what structures this will apply to. So typically, that they might just say, okay, sole trader. Now, a sole trader, we can understand, means just someone operating in business by themselves. But a lot of small businesses, in fact, the majority of ours, will operate through, say, a partnership or often a trust or a company. So the question is, will it still apply to those who operate through one of those other entities for other reasons, be it asset protection or commercial viability in order to get contracts? At this stage, we have no detail. We don't know. But we do know that the government has expanded this to self-employed people as well. So they're not disadvantaged against those who are employed. Finally, on this measure, they've said that New Zealanders who are here working under this special category of visa will similarly qualify along with Australian permanent residents and citizens. So that's an important distinction there. So what we're seeing out there in terms of our clients, what we found is that this has changed the landscape in terms of employees making a decision on whether to retain or whether to lay off employees, because for a lot of them viability was an issue, and as much as they would like to continue employing these people, there was no revenue. So this is actually quite an important measure, and it should result in a lot of employers keeping people on for this 6-month period. Going back to policy intent here, I think the government and most government agencies have been told that there's a 6-month window here where they expect us to be working under these restricted conditions because of COVID-19. So for that reason, they've made it a 6-month measure, much like ATO payment arrangements, etc., which I'll speak about later. So that's that's a real positive so far. Again, the devil's in the detail, so we'll wait to see what comes out in due course in terms of legislation as we work through it.